everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about preference schedule voting. So take 3 deep breaths and let's make this math easy. Okay, so with preference schedule voting, it's a little bit different than approval voting because in approval voting, you go through all of the options that you're voting for and you vote on whether or not you approve of each option. So it's kind of like a yes or no kind of a vote. With preference schedule voting, you go through all of the options and you rank them from first choice to last choice. And because the data that we collect is slightly different than with approval voting, the way that we determine the winner is also slightly different. So preference schedules are used to summarize the voting data where the voters are rating the options as their first, second, third, etc. choice. So this is an example of a preference schedule, and it's a vote between 3 different political candidates. And when we look at it, what it's communicating is that there are 342 people who voted for L as their first choice, Don as their second choice, and Key as their third choice. And then the other columns are representing the same thing, but with different choices. So these 214 people voted for Don first, then Key, then L. And this is an example of a preference schedule. And the way that we create a preference schedule is we basically summarize all of the votes from everyone who voted. So take, for example, this set of data that I collected from my first Math 1030 class. And I asked everybody to rank their favorite movie genres from first choice to fourth choice. And when everybody answered the survey, this summarizes the results that I got. And if you look at it, we have some people who voted exactly the same. Like these 4 people here all voted comedy as their first choice, Disney as their second, horror as their third choice, and romance as their fourth choice. And so I can summarize that in a preference schedule by saying that 4 people chose comedy, Disney, horror, and romance. Then I can look at my next set of votes that were the same, and I can see that all of these people voted for comedy, Disney, romance, and then horror. And if I count those up, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people who voted that way. And so I would put a 10 in that column. And if I go through my entire table and summarize all of the data, I end up with this preference schedule. And the whole point of making a preference schedule is to kind of summarize the data so that it isn't quite as long. Because I could have given this survey to hundreds of students, and it would be much easier to deal with those hundreds of votes if you summarize them into a table that showed how many votes were all the same. So the basic idea of a preference schedule is that these numbers in the top column tell you how many people chose the vote that is listed below. So when you're interpreting preference schedules, there's several different things you can tell from looking at them. So first of all, you can tell how many people voted if you add up the numbers of all of the different unique votes. So if I were to add up all of these numbers, that would tell me how many people had voted. And if you're asked how many votes are needed for a majority just means that you have more than half. And so in this case, since we have 3 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 4 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1 plus 4 plus 1, it looks like we have a total of 23 people who voted. And if I split that number in half, I get the number 11.5. And so the number of votes that would be needed for a majority is 12, because 12 is the whole number that's bigger than 1/2 of 23. And so that's how you would determine how many votes are needed for a majority. And then you can also look at specifics. So like if you were asked how many people chose hiking as their first choice, well, you could say it looks like these 4 or 5 columns represent the people who chose hiking as their first choice. And if you add up all of these numbers, that would tell you how many people chose hiking as their first choice. And so when you're trying to determine the winner of a preference schedule vote, there's 4 different ways that we're going to use to determine the winner. So we have the plurality method, the instant runoff method, the board account method, and Copeland's method. And all 4 of these methods use different criteria to determine which one of your options is the winner. And oftentimes, you'll get different results depending on which method you use. So you're going to go through in the future videos and learn each one of these methods individually. And then we'll take a look at what types of benefits or drawbacks each one of these methods has. So to summarize, preference schedule voting is the type of voting where you list your preferences from first choice to last choice. And we have 4 different methods that we can use to determine the winner when we're looking at a preference schedule summary. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in class.